if you think that there are some others, like, I don't know.
I think someone started on it, but kind of how one drill flows into the other. Be prepared to, how can I set this drill up to be ready for the next one so that you're not taking up time to set up your drill or change what you need to get from one drill to the next. So, okay,
I think we are gonna talk about that in the next minutes. So, Cook, if you want, we can go through the next slide.
After talking about these factors, we continue with some that are important to us, and you have also two. The first player, okay, principal factor. The first question, do I know the number of players I have before planning the session? Do you think it's important that? And why?
I think it's important to know how many players you have, because there are certain drills that require, like if we're doing, we have the box drill that we do where there's 3 players on the outside, 1 player in the middle. And if you have, like I usually have a number that is equal enough to go around and be like, we won't have to have any extra players on the side. But if all those players don't show up, then I kind of have to tweak and figure out how to make that drill still work. So if I don't know how many players are going to be there, then it kind of makes it a little harder to plan. But by knowing it, then I can plan the appropriate size of drill that I should be able to do. That's what I'm thinking from that.
Someone else? And the second question, do I have a plan B to adapt the drill if I'm missing, for example, a player at the last minute?
Yeah, and I think it's important to also pick, based on your objective and what obviously the individual player objectives are important, but your overall team and planning objective, picking drills that can be done with certain numbers. So when I start, I may want to do a 6v6 plus 6, but how can I attribute that to a 4v4 plus 4, 3v3 plus 3, just in case the numbers don't work? Can I use a extra player, a neutral player, to attain the same objective of the practice? So just having a general understanding, I think, allows you to deal with any random number of players that show up on how a session will work. So.
And how do you act, or what do you do if you miss a player at the last minute?
That's not uncommon where we're from. So it's something we deal with on a daily basis with our training sessions. So we just adjust if a progression requires an even number. You just adjust to make it as even as possible, or you use 2 neutral players. You just try to make it work to continue to allow everybody to gain the same understanding of what you're trying to do, and rotate players through. At each water break, rotate players around to make sure everybody gains the same effect. So it's just about setting up progressions that can work with multiple numbers, because you don't want to pigeonhole yourself or stick yourself with a certain progression that needs a exact number.
Okay.
Yeah.
Next.
Okay. Next.
Okay.
Next topic. Another factor we think is very important is the space I have to prepare the training, okay? The first question in this topic is, do I know how much space I have before starting? And the same question, if for you important, why?
Yeah, for me, it's very important because you want to, especially if you planned out your session, to know that you're going to have that space allocated to you. Especially, nothing's more frustrating when you get there and you have something planned and you see that you have less space, and then you have to adjust. With that being said, if it happens, I mean, you have to adjust. But I think space is important.
Okay. Someone else?
For me, just from way we're here in Nebraska, we don't always train in the same field or same facility throughout the week. So some weeks we're indoor in a real small space, and then other days we're outside where we have half field. And so it's just good to know what days you have, which space, so you can plan out your drills and utilize the full space on the days that you have it, so you can work on different things throughout the week. You don't want to have, if you have half a field, you'd like to use that space when you can to work on, different areas of your game.
Nice. And the second question in this topic, in what way does the space I have available limit me when it comes to planning decision?
I think the space can determine the type of progression and session you do. If you have 18 players, but you have a 30 by 30 space, that's going to affect, the different types of progressions you're going to do to get the same objective. If you have a larger space, maybe you can work on, it just, the size of the space definitely determines how you go about your progression. So it's very important to understand that prior.
Do you think it's the same, the training with 10 players and 15 players, for example, in the same space?
Depending on the size of the space, it's whether you can use more players in a progression. It's how you break it out. So can it become 8v8, or does it have to stay 4v4 with two teams on it? It just, you don't want to overcrowd, and you don't want to expand into so much space it's ineffective as well. So it's the space really determines how you use the number of players that you have. So just knowing that space prior to can affect your entire session.
And have you ever adapted the space during the drill? Imagine you do a 4v4 in a little space, and you think that it's impossible to the team to do 10 passes or whatever you are working, and then you stop the drill and you adapt, or what do you do, guys? I don't know if I explain really good with my English, but do you understand me?
Yeah, I think that depends on what type of player you have as well. So if you have a pretty advanced group, then obviously a 4v4 in a tighter space, they're going to be able to do it. So that's just your players, and if you need to adjust, 5 yards on each side to give them a little bit more space so that they're more successful. But kind of like how Todd was saying, if you expand it too much, then you lose that drill as well, because then it becomes too easy, and too much space is an issue as well. So I think just understanding your players and being able to adjust depending on them. Sometimes you have to.
And I also think it goes back to what you're trying to accomplish as well. If you're trying to get 10 passes in a small space to play quicker, play less touches and stuff like that, it's more cohesive to be in a 20 by 20. But if you're looking to open space, find longer passes, longer, switches to the point of attack and stuff, you're going to want more space, and that's tougher to do in a smaller area.
So because I imagine that you think about the drill before the session, and you think about the space and the goal. And if the goal or the objective of the drill is not, I don't know how to say it, if you can see the goal during the drill, you stop the drill and then you do something to change it.
Can you repeat that? Sorry. I just want to make sure I understand exactly what you're asking.
Yeah, for example, I'm gonna make an example with me. When I'm do the session before the training, when I'm thinking about it, I think about the goal of the drill. I think about the space of the drill, and then when I'm in the field, I start the drill, and sometimes it's not working because maybe the space is too small, or there are a lot of players. So sometimes I stop the drill to change the space, to do it bigger or to do it smaller. Do you do the same, or do you still playing?
No, I take a more progressive approach. So instead of stopping the drill, I'll adjust and then give the explanation as. So I'll let them continue to play, but I can make the grid bigger or smaller and just, okay, boys now, okay, girls now. This is your spaces. So I try not to stop the game and the flow of what's going on.
But you change it.
Yeah.
Okay.
I agree.
Okay. Continue with type of the drill. You talk now about this more or less, but the question now is, when do I plan the drills? You can make an example if you want.
Do you plan it before the session or during the session?
I would say a little bit of both. I mean, obviously, if they're not progressing, kind of like in a session, in an individual session, if you needed more time to do a topic, then obviously that's, you know, you need an extra session or two to go over that topic just to make sure that they understand it. But I mean, I try and have an idea after I know what I have, then kind of go about those areas, but then also still working with the individual objectives throughout the training sessions. So it's more tailored to the individual objectives. And then getting that out of the team objectives. The
Okay.
team.
Someone else? Someone else?
I try to do, you know, based on the objective, based on the planning, kind of everything we've already discussed. You know, understanding where I start, where I try to. So in planning, setting up the field, organizing the field on a whole, and then condensing it into the progressions from there as well. So understanding the field space. So it's definitely prior to. You know, and also based on what I see the team and the needs of the team and the needs of the individuals. So yeah, definitely prior to instead of when I show up to the field.
Okay. And do I make the change for its drill before the season? Are they always the same, or you change the teams?
You mean the actual players, like when you separate teams out for the progression? Are they always the same?
If for the drills, for example, when you do
For the drills?
yeah, and
Exactly.
or before, do you think this for that team, before to that team before the session? Or
It for me, it depends on the objective of the session. If I'm working on defensive shape, for instance, it's going to, I want my defenders to be together. If it's less about that and more about just ball movement, simple possession, things of that nature, it doesn't matter as much who's on whose team at that point, because that might be the first progression of the session. But as we get into more specific, you know, spacing, organization, positional stuff, yeah, I will tend to earmark certain players and make sure certain players stay on each other's teams.
And what about the others, guys? We want to hear you. We need to know your opinion.
So yeah, try to group, player, your midfielders with your midfielders, defenders with defenders, forwards, and so on. And obviously you have, if you have a full 18, you're gonna have multiple players that play multiple positions. So just kind of move players around to players that they would play in this, in the game with. But you try to keep it to the same core group so that they are familiar with playing with each other, and really get a good understanding of, how this player is going to play and where they're going to be at, and start building that trust with the players that surround them. But it's also good to switch players up so they can understand, if I'm a defender and you move them to forward and drill, they may not know that that's what they're doing, but they start understanding, if I make this run, and they start seeing the field from a different perspective also, make things interesting.
Okay. And this question for me is very important. When do I set up the next drill? And it's the same if you are only one coach or you are two coaches, for example. It's the same?
I mean, I think if you have an assistant coach, it's easier to transition because one can focus as long as there's a plan prior to practice. It's, you want to set your session up too, so that it's very easy to just take away a cone or two or move a goal. It's definitely easier when you have an assistant coach because you can adjust easier while still running the session. But for me, setting the entire session up from the end to the beginning. So understanding my boundaries for the last progression and then setting the entire drill so it's easy to take things out and add things as you go. But if I have to change things and organize, like I say, I do things in the flow of play, or I'll wait till that water break or that little area break where I can quickly just do something. I feel like I'm talking too much. So
no, so you set up all the drills before to start.
Yeah, so if, with the planning of the session, I'll know where I want to go. And if I need 2 goals by the end and I need a 40 by 30 field, but then I'm going to start with possession of a 20 by 20. The 40 by 30 will be set up at the beginning. And then I will set up the 20 by 20 inside of it. So when we move at the break, I can quickly just take 3 cones away and the next field's already there. So it's just pre-planning and making sure everything's organized.
And I would say that probably is more important for us over here. Like for myself, I don't necessarily have an assistant coach, so it's just me. Whereas when I was in Villarreal, you had 4 or 5 coaches. So understanding your progress, like kind of Todd was saying, because that's how I do it too. I set up the big area first and then break it down from end to finish, from the end to the beginning, so that I just have to move 1 or 2 cones. So that's just knowing that I'm so it keeps everything flowing quickly, and you're not losing any time.
Nice. Cristiano, what about you?
Yeah, same thing there. Hello, yeah, I'm here.
Okay.
Same thing that Todd, Tyler, the guys that just spoke before, we work together, same academy. So yeah, it's the same thing that they were saying. When you have 2 coaches, which is rare where we're from, so we try and adapt the same way, like from one drill to the other, so we don't waste too much time adjusting or try to correct something, making the kids wasting their time.
And how you split with the other coach or the assistant coach? Both of you set up the drill, or do you do something different? For example,
well, when I had an assistant coach, was we used to split the same thing. Like we know, of course, what we're gonna do prior, and then we start the drill. And as we progress to the next drill, or are we going towards the end of the first drill? He already knew what's to be the next one, so we already adjusting. So since we have two persons, so one can pay attention what we're doing, the other one can move, and then once they're done, we'll pay attention and both can start the drill right away because the other one was working on setting up the next drill. I have explained myself good.
Yeah, so like Raphael that's on this call works with me on one of my teams, and that's what there's always, this is what we're going to do this session. So we both have an understanding, and then from there we can just, it's easier to adjust when you have two, or in your case, like 6 or 7 or 8, how many coaches you guys have.
Yeah, it's not very easy to be one.
Yeah, that's exactly. We're trying to be creative a lot. We've been using a lot of creativity here when we're by ourselves because it's just an hour and 15 and we train the kids. And if you spend like 5 minutes just putting cones, one drill and another 5 or 3, whatever, to put another cones is a waste of time. So we're trying to adapt as much as possible. And the surprise factor, it's a big thing here. One day, 14 kids, or I'll say 18 show up. The other day, 8. So the day before, you're like, oh, that's good. Everybody came. So let's do something better or a little bit more. They can think about it. And then it shows 8. It was like, oh my God, what I'm going to do? Let's, you got to adapt a lot here. So you got to be on your toes. Just like you on their toes, we got to be on our toes too, to adjust and to make the best of the hour 15 that we have in our hands to teach them.
That's really difficult.
Yeah.
But it's
Nice.
good. It's fun. It's good.
And that kind of plays into the part. I know.
Okay. Do you think?
Sorry. Go ahead.
Do you think the space is important in this question? When do I set up the next drill? Is the same in a big space and in a small space?
No, space is very important. Yes, definitely. It depends on the amount of kids that you have. It's because they play in a big field. So depending on how many players you're gonna have, you can have the field too small. But again, the surprise factor comes once again. So sometimes you set up the field, you want to be ready with the big field with 7-7 plus 4 outside or something like that. Oh, we got 8 kids, so let me run here some fitness and adjust a little bit smaller. So it feels big with a small number of players. When you have a lot of number of players, then you make the field even bigger. So I think that's the challenge. But in space, it's crucial because you have to give them a notion of space because on the weekends, they're going to play in the big field. If you always play in this really small, tight space, when they go to the big field, they're going to be confused. Like, coach, why is it so big? I don't know what to do.
To be 2 in 30. 30.
Yeah.
Preface that Cristiano coaches 13-year-olds that only played on a 9 field last year and a 11v11 this year. So
yeah,
he's dealing with that factor as well.
It's the cherry on top of the cake.
So,
Okay, very nice. Continue with the next topic.
yeah.
Okay, guys, now equipment, okay? And the first question is, am I clear on what equipment I will be using before each season? Do you think it's important?
I think once you plan your session, you get an idea of what equipment you'll need, and then you can adjust from there based on what's available. So like, for instance, example in our club, we try to afford the coaches as much equipment as we can. But, obviously if something they need isn't there and they have to get on it. So it's just understanding what we have and what's available and then what your need is. So I think everything comes into play that we're talking about. So yeah, it's important to understand what equipment is accessible, but if it's not, how you can still create the same objective without that equipment.
Okay, someone else?
How much equipment do you use? Do you use a lot of cones, a lot of hurdles?
I personally don't like to use a lot of equipment to populate too much the field, but when it's necessary, of course, to give the players a notion of, oh, look, because if you put them out there and it just, oh, let's be realistic, let's work on patterns, for example, on the formation, and how we're going to build off the back if we don't have the numbers. So we split them and put them on the basic from, I'm talking for how I train sometimes. And if you leave the field too blank, like too empty, or not even with the mannequins in there, they get confused. They just play unrealistic passes, or they do unrealistic moves. So sometimes you have to populate a little bit the field with those equipments. So then, look, it's gonna have a player here. So
like an iPort.
yeah, just not pass like so casual, because it's gonna have a player here during the game day. So trying to be more realistic. So in that case, for sure, you have to put some equipment in there, mannequins or whatever you want to use. But usually I don't like to use a lot of things to populate it, just to put the lines and let's play, and so they to be more close to the game situation.
What about the others? Come on, Karsten. Karsten is your name?
Yep, you got it. I also don't use a whole lot of equipment. At this time, I don't really have a whole lot of equipment besides the goals we have and some cones. So I more or less do what I can with what I have. And like what my other coaches have said, I don't like to have a lot of stuff on the field. I don't like things being super cluttered. So I just kind of use this minimal amount to get the job done.
And what about the whistle? Do you use a lot, or do you use it?
I haven't used a whistle. I use my voice, and they usually listen. And it's kind of hard to, in the academy setting, we're all on the same field. So I feel like if everyone was blowing a whistle, then it would distract the kids, because I know at games, if they hear a whistle on the other field, they're like, oh, the whistle blew, but it's really the other field or the other practice.
And I think a coach having a whistle in a session builds behavioral. So if they're constantly listening to your voice, then they're going to respond to your voice. If you're blowing whistles, then when you get into games, they're not going to, it's less behavioral to listen to your instruction in your voice or your direction or whatever, because the whistles are for referees.
Perfect.
Nice. Very nice, guys. Continue.
Okay.
Next topic, guys. Number of drills, okay? How many drills do I do during the season? 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe more? And why?
All right, I'll go again. I didn't talk at the beginning. Now I'm talking a lot. Let's say on a session, I'll plan like 3 or 4, but when I start the drill, then I understand that they're doing well. They're understanding the message or the goal of the drill. If they don't on the first one, then I'll push a little bit longer until they get what's going on. You cannot be too short and, oh, that's good, we'll do something tomorrow or the other day. I don't think so. Like, if I come here with the goal in my mind, I'm trying to achieve as much as possible. So if I have to stick with one drill for the whole session for them to get it, my message, like the goal of my objective, I think I do that. Like, because it doesn't make sense if you're playing something, you think your team needs that, and then the first struggle that you have, because sometimes you don't get it at the first, and the first struggle you have, you just quit to move to the easier one, or you adapt to an easier one. I mean, of course you have to adapt, but the main goal, are you achieving? If you're not, I think I keep pushing a little bit farther. No, let's get it. Once they get it, and I see it's pretty clear, okay, let's progress. Let's go to the next one. Let's progress for the next one. But I think we have to have in mind a couple drills in our head,
Someone else?
Come on, guys. We want to know about everyone.
Yeah, I would say I'm kind of the same with Cristiano, about 3 or 4. And that just depends on, like how he said, depends on how they're doing throughout the session. If they're really grasping it, then we move on to the next, and hopefully finishing out with the game. So the game is 1, and then 2 other progressions before that. So that's kind of how I do it.
So sometimes do you extend the drill, or
I think there's a line that you have to understand, whether that you extend it to hope that they do get it, or they starting to kind of grasp it, and then you allow that extra time. And then there's somewhere, you go through 5-10 minutes, like, holy crap, like this is just way, and you just kind of scrap it and you have to go to something different. Because it might be too advanced for them. They might just not understand it. So I think there's that line of, do you extend it, and how long do you extend it? And then when do you just say, okay, like this is not something that they can understand, maybe we just have to come back to it, or so I think that just depends.
so if the team, I think, is achieve the goal, is that the word, achieve?
Yeah.
Yeah, if the team is achieving the objective drill, do you extend it, or
Maybe you manipulate it a little bit to get something else out of it, to maybe that's where your end target goal is to get it. Maybe you broke it down into a smaller objective, into the bigger objective of the whole of the training session. So maybe you just adjust it to make it a little bit more difficult, and then you see how they react from there. And then maybe sometimes you do just move on.
Okay, and if the drill is not working, the team is not achieving the goal, do you extend it? Do you stop the drill?
I think that depends as well. If you can see that they're like almost there, like they kind of get it, then I think, yeah, you extend it to give them that little bit extra time, and maybe you still keep on working with them. If they're flat out just don't get it, then I think there's a point of, are you wasting time, I guess. So I guess that just depends.
But I think that goes to like the plan B. Like I've had trainings where, because you coach at various ages, we're trying to introduce something at a younger age to see if we can progress into it, and it just wasn't working. They weren't ready. They just, maybe their mind, they weren't thinking mentally correct that day. Where you just kind of had to have, this isn't working today, and you need to move on, because you want them to feel like they're succeeding. You want them to feel like they're progressing, and so it's not always keep going over the same thing. But I have had teams where they've done the drill 100 times, and then today they act like they can't connect more than 2 pieces. It's just not working, and it's just, all right, you guys, we're going to sit here and do this until you guys decide to get it right. And so it's just, each team's a little different, or each group, really.
Yeah, it depends on a lot of
Okay.
Well, and I also think it's an individual basis thing as well, because maybe it's not the entire team that's breaking down the session. Maybe it's 1 or 2 players that you can help their understanding, and that'll change everything for the success of the thing. So sometimes in whether I'm understanding I'm doing it or not, it will prolong longer than I wish, because I'm focusing on that individual. And because as a coach, you can see that 8 out of 10 players understand what they're doing. So for me, it's easier just to work with the 2 players and allow everybody else to continue to play, rather than just give up and move on to something else, because the point of the progressions in the session is to get to an objective.
Yeah.
Okay. And guys, do you think in the next drill, for example, when you use the material, you think use this material in different drills, or you change all the material?
Are you referring to, like, is it from so if you have 4 drills, 1 leads into 2, leads into 3, leads into 4, or 1 is different from 2, different from 3, different from 4?
Yeah, I think it's talking about the thing that you said before, like you set up all the drills and then, or you use different equipment, different cones, same cones.
Yes.
I would say for time management, I think you have to use the same cones because you don't want to have to pick up and then set down another time because that's just going to take too much time. I mean, now obviously, if you have four or five coaches, then that's a little bit different to where you can have a discussion while two other coaches are picking up and setting up. So I think that kind of plays into it. But I think for all of us, more of kind of what Todd said at the beginning is, and I think Corey as well, is just picking up one or two cones as we go through. So using the same equipment, I guess. Short answer of your question.
But philosophically, I think the first progression should lead into the second. So at the end of the session, when you bring your team in and do your summary, one of the first questions is, what was today about? What was the understanding of today about? And how did the first progression lead to the second progression, lead to the third? So your equipment you set up at the beginning. If you're going to use 2 big goals at the end, they're somewhere near the field. If you're going to use 4x6s, they're somewhere near the field. So it's very easy to achieve that. But at the end of the day, one progression should lead into the other with an understanding of what it's a building process.
Okay. Nice, guys. Continue. Next topic, organization of time. How do I organize the time of the training session?
I think the key part is just planning it out, having, your training is going to be 90 minutes today. You have 4 drills you want to get through, or a warm up and 3 drills. Just having it planned out and having everything prepared ahead of time is the key part there.
Do you use the same time for the different drills, or?
No, not necessarily. Each drill, depends, each drill can be different times. Depends on how many drills you have for the day. If you're only planning on getting the warm up and then some 4+3, and then working into a full field scrimmage, each thing could be a little different. Organization is just all about planning. So as long as you've planned ahead and you have a plan B, usually pretty easy to keep organized.
Yeah, it depends on the intensity that you want from the kids too. If you want an intense practice, like boom, 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 you can let that go for 10 minutes. It's like one either or another. You either let them play and possess the ball and be like a game, or if you want to really get them going and going after each other, it's a short period of time and going after each other. Intensity, I mean, that's how I like it, like, because game days are going to be like that. Boom, boom, and then you stop for a little bit, let them breathe because they're humans, and then again, that's how I go. I break down. I try to do, like, instead of just a big water break or a big stop, and just a little stops by time. And again, it's a short time that they are with us, so we're trying to make the most of it, So I think when you organize the time, it depends how the intensity that you want from the kids.
Okay. And guys, the day of the week is important for you. You adapt this factor, all this factor. Okay? It's important the day of the week.
Like, how close are we to the weekends for the game days? You say if that.
Yes.
Or would you say vice versa? Like if you just came off like a game weekend, like you're training on that Monday and you just had 3 games.
For example,
Okay, please.
the type of the drill is the same Monday and Thursday.
Oh, no.
This is my question.
Yeah, no, I understood. Yeah, it depends on the weekend. The previous weekend, if they, like Tyler said, is they play 3 games on a weekend, whatever, and then on a Monday they show up for practice. I mean, I cannot demand much as far as physical, from them. So then we can adjust. And of course, a Thursday is the same thing because it's closer to the weekend, so I need them to be fresh. Depends how many games they're gonna play. It's a bunch of what if in there that you have to think about it before going at the beginning of the week and then at the end of the week. So it does matter. The answer to your question, it does matter the day of the day and how you're gonna practice.
Someone else?
I kind of organize my practices based on what to expect. I do Tuesday, Thursdays. So Tuesdays, I'm focusing more on technical and ball skill, just little finite foundation kind of things. Thursday, I move towards more focus on gameplay and positioning and things to get them ready for the weekend.
So you are training 2 days during the week. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Continue for the last topic. No. And the last one is objective of the season. Is there a main objective for the season and a secondary objective? Do you think it's important? Do you think in this when you prepare the drill?
Sure. Yeah, you gotta have objective in not just in a session. I think everything on your life gotta be having an objective. In the same thing with practice. The main one, I don't possess the ball better or improve on tactics, whatever. And as you try and achieve the main goal, you can have small goals. I want that for the players, for example. I have a main objective, and then I have another 11 small objective that I want to achieve for each player. Like, for example, I'm saying on each player, I need this guy to be better at passing. This guy needs to work on passing, and this guy needs to be better on tactics, how he plays himself on the field, how he moves off the ball. So I think inside that goal, you have many small little goals. So as far you need to know your team, like what do you need to get better.
For example, imagine we want to work the pressing of the team. You are training the pressing during the whole training.
Pressing, like it comes back to what I said about intensity. If you want to get the ball, if you want to press the other team, you need to be fresh. I cannot be pressing the whole time. They're gonna get tired. They're gonna get sloppy. Is that what we're saying? Or
yeah, but pressing, for example, pressing a team that is playing out from the back. The organization of the pressing.
So you say as you build the progression of the session, the ultimate objective is to get to that point of the understanding of what's the most successful way to press a team that's playing out of the back. So everything leads to that.
Yeah, but for example, if the main objective is the pressing of the team, the organization of the pressing, the secondary objective will be playing out from the back. Because you have
you mean like I can't understand. Like, yeah, let's say my goal today is to press them, right? And then later on, I want to play out of the back too, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's one way, but that is hard for the kids too because you're telling them all the tools. Then it comes to the individual talent to come out of the situation, the bad situation. It comes down to the player. Like, you can give them the information. Look, you're gonna press like this. The other team is right there listening to you. So, they're gonna do that. So we can do this and adjust. So you have two goals exactly on the same drill, but to break that drill to work for either side, it comes down to the technique to the player, the IQ of the player. To look, coach told me that, but I think if I do this, I can come out of this pressure situation with pressing them, or getting out of the press. Is
Well,
that does that make sense? Or
it makes sense, and I don't know if I can build it. So what I think, Cristiano, you can actually take care of both objectives in the same exact session progression. Your focus can be more on the pressing, but at the same time, if you're pressing your backs, they're having to learn how to play out of the back quicker, because the whole objective, the main objective of the session, is to press the back. So the secondary objective is possibly putting 2 goals at midfield and saying from the back, your goal is to do this. So the coach, and again, this comes back to, do you have 1 coach on the field, 2 coaches on the field, 3 coaches? With 1 coach, my main objective might be pressing pressing a team, playing out of the back. So it's harder for me to focus on the secondary objective within that session, because
but I mean, my question is, do you focus on the same objective during the whole session, or you change it during the drills? I mean, if you want to, if the main objective is the pressing, how the team organize the pressing, you can start the session, for example, with 1 rondo that you can focus to the player how to press the ball. The second one can be a bigger rondo with 2 or 3 guys pressing, and then a big drill with 7, 8 players pressing. I don't know how many players do you have on the team, but that's the question that I have. If you do that, like 1 main objectives, and then you split in the drills.
So working from small to large, small to big. So yeah, starting with maybe a 4v4 v4 or 6v6 v6 with 3 in a channel and 3 pressing. And then moving on to a bigger surface where you're pressing more like a possession type surface, and then moving into with 2 goals and stuff like that. Yeah, but I think in general, all your progressions, and you call them drills, I'm sorry, I call them progression. So 1, 2, 3, 4 are all leading towards that main objective. So everything you're doing is building from small to large to get that understanding of the small space and how you do it here individually, into a group space, into a team space.
Okay. So you work with a main objective during the session?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
So, and I kind of what Todd was saying, and Cristiano, kind of what I do is I have that main objective. So the progressions lead up to that main objective until we get to the kind of game realistic situation, where we have like offense versus defense, kind of, I guess, scrimmage, whatever you want to call it. But then as they're working on that pressing, if they're pressing really well, you still want to stimulate so it's not too easy. So then you're going to work on that secondary objective, which is kind of what Todd and Cristiano was saying, which is how can you build out quickly? So now you're going to work with the other group of how can they build out quickly so that it's more difficult for them, for the other team how to press. So now you're trying to stimulate both aspects. So it's not super easy that you're only working just on that one main objective. Now you're working on both of those objectives by switching back and forth on which group I guess you're working on, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense.
So that's kind of what I do with my groups.
And that's nice, man.
Okay.
So, okay.
And guys, my last question is, any factor that we talk now will change my main objective?
I think the biggest factor that could change your main objective for any session is your player numbers, because I think there's certain things that you're trying to, certain objectives you're trying to get to. So, for instance, if it's very hard to work on pressing a secondary objective, building out of the back, if 6 players show up to your session. It just becomes very difficult to do that. So I think player numbers would be, I think field space, you can work in that. You can work in that parameter. You can work on that platform. I think we can all figure out ways to get that done. I think at the end of the day, what it comes down to is if you're planning on a session that needs anywhere from 10 to 18 players and 7 players show up, it becomes very difficult to get your objective across.
Yeah, I totally agree with that's the key factor for sure. Again, you're trying to simulate and practice game situation, right? So when they get to the game, they know they're comfortable, they know what to do. And sometimes some drills or activities demands more players, so you can use the whole field, and just like Todd say, in 10, let's say, or 8, whatever shows up, and like, oh, and then you have to adapt again and completely change the objective for that session. Completely change. You have to go. Let's do this. Let's work on this because we're not gonna do it today. And that for sure, number of players is a key factor here that can change the objective.
I agree with you.
Okay.
Yeah. And the last question, guys, is: do you have some paper or some structure to write all these factors to plan the session? And how do you do that? In the computer, in a paper?
So I guess for us, like with Todd, he worked with Ishmael about getting a session planner. So we all have a session. So they sorry.
Some do, some don't. But unfortunately, there's like a worldwide pandemic that kind of stopped a lot of our process. So unfortunately, not everybody has these session planners.
So you some of you don't have a session planner. Is that because sometimes my English is not really good and I didn't understand?
No. At least from our club, we were developing one that suited our club based on our coaches' meetings with Orto, and putting together one that made sense for us with player objectives and training progressions and all of that. And we were supposed to release that on March 23rd, and unfortunately, we shut everything down on March 15th and have been in this holding pattern. So. He's just now joining our coaching sessions back. Like we have a 6:30 meeting after this, and he'll be involved in that. So that's kind of building that up. But right now, everything's kind of for, hopefully 3-4 weeks from now. So they will have session planners, yes, but they do not currently.
And what do you think that has to appear in a session planner?
Well,
go ahead. Sorry.
Well, I guess like one thing that I liked when I was over there was that, like with us, we're working on the player objectives. So having the player objectives on the session so that you can just look at it. But also one thing that I like that I've been using is not necessarily the objective of the player, but also what they're good at. So on the back of it, writing down what they're also comfortable with, so you can enhance that aspect, but then also still working with the team objective throughout that training. So having your progression through, but also having access to knowing what your players are and individuals.
So I think it's important to have sort of a setup, the progression idea, breakdown of what you're trying to achieve in each session, so that it's something that you can relate back to at a later time if it's something that you want to use. So those session planners not only become about the current and here, but it becomes a resource for the future for either yourself or other coaches.
Very nice. Okay, guys, we finish for today. Okay, thank you for this moment. It's a great pleasure for Julio, Yago, and me. It has been I have learned a lot with your answer, and I hope you are all well in your home with this virus. And thank you so much.